Good afternoon and welcome to the Caregiver Teleconnection. We're so glad you're with us. My name is Glenda Rogers and I'm going to be your facilitator for today's session. Today we have with us Dr. James Huysman. He's one of our regular presenters and we're so glad about that. And he's going to be talking about, can we honestly say that we love ourselves? And I hope by the end, Jamie will be able to say yes to that question. So let me tell you a little bit about him. Dr. James Huysman built his innovative healthcare career on the premise that necessity is the mother of invention. His belief that the resilience of the human spirit and collaboration are key to our country's health future is the core to his philosophy. He is a fierce advocate of patient-centered healthcare and a workforce in touch with their own wellness. He has almost 30 years of medical and behavioral health experience in nonprofit and for-profit corporate leadership roles. Today, he works in provider relations and governmental affairs for WellMed Medical Management, a San Antonio, Texas-based physician-owned primary care organization. Dr. Jamie, welcome to our session.
Thank you so much, Glenda. Thank you all for being here. Literally, I don't know if I've gotten a promotion or not, Glenda, but I am now, whatever they call it, the Chief Compassion Officer at WellMed. How's that?
Oh, yay.
Yeah. So I gather they may include my other job description. I need to talk to my boss about that, but I think it's the perfect sort of segue and to be able to talk about today and our topic today. So it's I think everybody should be their own Chief Compassion Officer. I think everybody at WellMed should be. I'm not sure there should be a title in one person's hand, but I'll take it. It's a good thing. And I'd love to be able to bring that sort of compassion to others. However, what we're going to find out today on the Take Your Oxygen First series for caregivers is that Valentine's month, okay, is the perfect time to show ourselves self-compassion. I mean, we cannot show anybody compassion. We cannot light a candle for somebody else until we light it for ourselves. So you all are probably the most awakened people who could tune in because you have tuned in. My mother says showing up is half the battle here. So you must have known it was Valentine's month, so we were going to milk it for caregivers as best as possible. And in milking it, I meant, can we honestly say we love ourselves? We talk about this word love, and we say it often, but as an expert witness, which I am often in domestic cases or family court, I see family members saying, I love you, I love you, I love you, and yet they're up for a felony or they're getting divorced because of some emotional or physical abuse or something. So we've confused the word love with actually an operational definition that doesn't make much sense. So we're going to today try to take Valentine's month, try to ask ourselves, do we honestly do that? And in the process, hopefully develop tips to cultivate it. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So it should not be 1 month, right? Everybody here agrees it's bizarre. It turns out to be a Hallmark card, I'm sure, thrust and outreach effort. I'm sure it sells a ton of cards. But at the end of the day, the month of love should be January through December. Today, we get to find out about it because of Valentine's Day. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure any of us even knows where it comes from unless Hallmark. So I had to go dig deeper and find out. And everybody here, there's always a reason. And in America, God love us, there seemingly is a desperate, dark reason that we have Valentine's Day. So it came about when St. Valentine, who was in prison, he fell in love with a jailer's daughter. And when he was being taken, of course, another American story, to be killed on the 14th of February, he wrote a love letter to her and signed it from your Valentine. Okay, is that too much information? I bet you prefer the Hallmark story. So, I mean, thus the name Valentine was born. And many of you who probably hover around my age, who may be on this call, or we know before we were here, there was obviously the St. Valentine's Day Massacre with Dillinger and any other sort of soprano-like group, and it became more famous and famous. But here it is, the derivation of the day. But it's not as easy as it sounds, right? Loving ourselves, tuning in here to ask ourselves, do we love ourselves? Finding tips on how to love ourselves. It's not quite as easy. If love was that easy, the whole world would be at peace and it's serene, right? But we have to start with ourselves. Love yourself enough to take the actions required for your happiness. Family caregivers right? Don't do this often enough. I got involved in 2002 developing the Lisa Gibbons Foundation and writing the book, Take Your Oxygen First, simply because caregivers were passing away before their loved ones. I, at that moment, knew we couldn't love ourselves. We didn't realize what love was. It was a codependent love. If we were taking care of somebody else and we were dying in the process and we're forgetting about our needs, well, we needed action, right? We needed to figure out what's required for our own happiness. So loving yourself enough to take the actions required for your happiness is important. Loving yourself enough to cut yourself loose from the ties of the drama-filled past, which are the ghosts and goblins. I call it, as a trauma therapist, complex PTSD or childhood PTSD. And when you hear other sort of presentations I've done about the body and neurological system, it's your fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response. The fawn is the codependent response. So we have to cut ourselves loose, or at least embrace the shadow of our drama and trauma-filled past. And at the end of the day, hopefully you tuned in to love yourself enough just simply to move on, right? I mean, today, this is what hopefully you're here. Anyway, I've worked with a lot of these people like Dr. Steve, and I only want to allude to our book, Take Your Oxygen First, only to the extent that I believe it is our self-love mantra. So any of you know, I've written that book with Lisa Gibbons and Dr. Rosemary Laird. We had no title. Many of you may have known that. And when I got on the plane going from Los Angeles to South Florida, that's when the stewardess came aboard and said, hey, you got to take the oxygen first. Don't give it to the person next to you. Otherwise, there'll be problems. And so for me, you know, the card-carrying, recovering codependent back then, we're trying to find the title. I called the Federal Aviation Association and they said, look, doc, you got 19 seconds of useful consciousness. God forbid if that plane goes down. 19 seconds. Many people survive, but it's a sure bet you will not survive, nor will your loved one, if you haven't taken the oxygen first. So I realized today for you, again, continually, if we're going to look at February as the month of starting to take care of ourselves, starting to love ourselves, starting to say, I love and I accept myself unconditionally, just the way I am, then we really have to have this mantra. Take our oxygen first. I don't care if you're putting sticky notes up or where you're putting it, but it's critical. So if you knew that you checked in for self-love here, which you did, surprise, surprise, I'm sure you know better, because as a therapist, I always want to start where you're at, not where I think you should be. You know better as to why you checked in. Maybe you are, maybe you want to confirm that you're doing is right. Maybe you don't feel as much love for yourself and you're looking for ways to do it. I'm not sure, but I'm going to ask you to take 15 seconds now, because as a trauma therapist, I believe everything is heart-centered and experiential. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and go inside and really ask yourself clearly, because you knew the title, right, about self-love, and you did check in. Go find the why you checked in, okay? All right, let's start doing that. When I click my fingers, close your eyes now, please. And we'll take just 15 seconds to go inside, okay? Starting right now. All right, open your eyes and come back. Hopefully you retrieved the why. If you didn't, don't worry about it. At the end of the day, I'm going to walk you through some places you can find out about your why, get more in touch with yourself. But why we need that, as opposed to the codependency, which is the external validation for our self-esteem, right? The people, places, and things that validate us. Internal motivation is always better than external, right? You don't have to go outside to get the attaboy or attagirl. You don't have to call your loved one in Cincinnati or New York and say, am I doing it right? Right? You know within, from your internal motivation, right, that you have a river of life that within you that never runs dry. When I mentioned to my daughter, she said, what's the secret of life? I said, sweetheart, I don't know, except get your therapist, right? Get authentic, talk to them. But I really believe, if I was to answer her honestly, because I like music too, it's more like what Metallica says, is that if you know yourself well, know everything about yourself, okay, then nothing else matters. Not somebody's names for you, not them putting you down, not them bullying you, not anything, because you know who you are. So I think that's the deal. So hopefully you found something inside that had you check in, but understand that self-love is exercising, and I don't like the word control, it's a four-letter word, unless it involves something like self-love, but it's exercising control over our own energy, okay? It's only something we can do. whether we set ourselves up in that situation, whether we're doing something experientially, is control over our own energy. So I do accept myself as I am. That's what we need to say. And I love myself enough to work on being better. That's the aspirational place. Don't worry, you don't have to be there yet, but that's literally the end goal of self-love. I accept myself. Okay, I'm going to turn the page. I get it. Anything I've done up to this point, I'll have compassion, was for a reason. And I love myself. And I'm here, which I hope you're here, to work on being better. Now, I did work in LA for a while. I did do these celebrity sort of donation deals once a year at Mr. Chow's, and got the opportunity to know a lot of people. And that's why I use, God rest his soul, Bob Saget here, because he didn't have a clue that the next day at that Ritz-Carlton in Orlando that he was going to pass. He really didn't. So I'm going to ask you to start the love process, the self-love process today. Because as Bob would say, today is the first day of the rest of your life. And if that doesn't work out for you, tomorrow is the first day of the rest of your life. But that didn't work out well for him. So it has to be today, right? We have to take our heart, and let's call it Valentine's month. Let's find the reason, but we have to take it in our own hands, understanding that we also are going to have perceived obstacles, things that go bump in the night, things that we tell ourselves from childhood, the fight, flight, freeze. I'm not good. I'm not right. Something's not good here. So, we got to be very honest with ourselves that change is hard. So if you haven't embarked on self-love, okay, you're going to find ghosts and goblins that are going to come in the way. Maybe our parents, and I can volunteer here, didn't do a good enough job in teaching us what self-love was. They didn't know what self-love was, right? So we come out with lower self-esteem, that fight, flight, fear, not safe. And most of the time, however, you have to understand it's our response to the ghosts that we have full control over. Meaning, we can't control the things out there, right? Heck, it says here, serenity is to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So those things that go bump in the night, they're done. We can't change it. But what we can do is take and deal with our response to them. So the ghosts and goblins can be our teachers today, right? When they show up, we can say, gosh, thank you. I am going to start working on myself. And that is what Take Your Action First is all about. When I'm taking care of a loved one, caree, and all of a sudden we're not feeling good and depleted, or we go back to those ghost-like talks, right? That hold us back, that I'm not enough, that I'm not lovable, that I don't feel, I don't care, I don't deserve to care, I don't enjoy, I'm to blame. All of those things were childhood responses, y'all. They don't happen in adulthood. In the psychological world, Freud and Jung and Rogers would tell you they happen between 0 and 8 years old. And our minds get tattooed, and that's where our temporal lobes are. And later on, we recreate it, because in psychology, we say we're doomed to recreate our dramas and traumas until we intervene on them. So you've tuned in, which is wonderful. Again, I'm the choir, the preaching to the choir piece. Tuning in is critical. But you tune in to hear maybe self-help tips about self-care. And I'm not going to have the conventional self-care deal, because I know as a psychologist that for years, psychology talked about going and seeing a therapist, talking about what happened to you when you were 5, 6 years old. But in the 1980s, we shifted that. Dr. Marshall Linehan began what's called dialectical behavioral therapy. In the 80s, it was for personality disorders. It was for the borderline, actually. And what she found out was something which I know already now as a trauma therapist, that trauma is not something that happens to you, it happens within you. So if you want to really love yourself, I'd like you today, again and again, anytime you hear us, we're from the emotional support response team at WellMed. We are neurologically driven. That's a wonderful thing. Wonderful. Because you don't have to depend on anybody but yourself for your neurosystem. I want you to weave some more awareness of your neurosystem and love for yourself into your life today. Okay. Now, I know it's difficult. There's some elementary things you can learn on the web about your nervous system, about what we call where we reason, which is the prefrontal cortex, or the emotional side, which is our limbic system, or gosh, we call the reptilian mind, the brainstem, which has us immediately doing things constantly without thinking. And what trauma or complex trauma does, it kind of shuts down the logic and reason, and you go right into the limbic system. This is your neurosystem. Okay, when you were a baby, My gosh, you had 9 months, many of you. My child had a little bit less, and so she was in the NICU. But you have 9 months of safety and serenity, and come out, and all of a sudden it's lights, camera, action. Somebody smacks your rear end, you scream, you see the lights. That's the metaphor for life. We have never really touched our neurosystem. Our neurosystem is the largest system in our bodies that goes to our lungs, our hearts, our gut, goes all throughout our body, and really controls so much of us. So if you want tuned in here to know about Valentine's month and to be triggered to do I love myself? Here is how to love yourself. It's the neuro-friendly way. Okay. It's not as difficult as you think. Okay. It doesn't require you necessarily to go back and talk about what happened to you at 5 years old. It's three things. It's emotional self-regulation, which is using strategy to enhance self-control in stressful situations. Guess what, y'all? That's just stress reduction. That's being in touch with your body. That if you're with your loved one, or you're with a doctor, or with somebody you're feeling dysregulated, what do I do then? Many of you know me by now. We're going to do breath work at the end, but there's other emotional self-regulators. I have people that talk to people who are angry all day on a hotline, and I have them crocheting. That's their self-regulator. What is your self-regulator? Okay. You can see behind me, I love rock and roll. Like last night, I was at John Cougar Mellencamp. I got calm. So what is your emotional self-regulator? I want you to start thinking about that. The second thing, okay, family caregiver, do not hang around people that are toxic. Do not hang around anybody that bullies you, governs you, tells you what to do, right? Social regulation of our neurosystem is the way we grew as a species, meaning the healthier we were, mind, body, the calmer we were, the more we allowed, I call social regulation, being listening to others, problem solving, not being angry, not being bullies. The more we met in the middle, the better we grew. And so finally, third part is self-managed self-regulation. So that's prevention. That's what you're actually doing now. Okay, you're staying calmer now because we're talking about some solutions, I hope. But that's it. There is no, silver bullet here. The beauty is, how do you befriend your neurosystem? Because loving ourselves is that. Okay, stress reduction, you hear a lot. But literally, if I can neurologically and psychologically take it to the place where I can tell you, you'll find this amazing oasis of love through self-love. It's self-regulation. So at WellMed, we'll ask our employees, look, I don't know. When Nancy Reagan said, just say no, I don't know any addict that just said, stop addiction. Or when I tell an employee, be calm, I don't know anybody who gets calm. Emotional self-regulation asks you as a caregiver to be in touch with your body. What we just did when I asked you to do your why, go inside. Our mind is a real funky thing. It can displace, distract, it can project, but the body keeps the score. So when you're in the middle of stress, self-regulation is what brings self-love. Okay. Now, again, I'm going to pound this baby home. You can do all the emotional regulating work. You can do the yoga, the Pilates, the walking around the place. You can do the crocheting. You can do, whatever blows your hair back. You can do the gratitude journaling. All that's fabulous. But if you're not doing it in a healthy social environment, you're going to be really fighting the ghosts and goblins, because the person or persons in an environment, it's a community. Okay. It could be your neighborhood, could be your church, it could be, it could be another group, it could be your family, but anybody who, again, is not listening, not learning from you, not meeting you halfway, but is then bullying you, dominating you, all the emotional regulation is not going to help if you keep going back to that. So it is a delicate balance. As you emotionally regulate, you've got to be in a healthy environment. And to do that, you've got to do an inventory. So many of you know, I sit on the board with this fabulous primary care physician named Dr. Gabor Mate. The board is with the Polyvagal Institute. I'd really, really welcome you as a family caregiver to go onto YouTube, write Gabor Mate in. His absolute amazing take. I use him because he's in recovery. He's a vulnerable human being too. And the next expert I use often is Brene Brown. She is too. Gabor will talk to you about what we desperately need. Many of you have been on presentations with me. It's not enlightenment on top of a Tibetan mountain. It's authenticity. Be able to speak, honor ourselves. And really, if we have an issue about the person in front of us, it's up to them to take care of it. So we need to be safe, and we never were as children. We really never got that shot. And we had needing a healthy emotional attachment, right? That's just recreating childhood. So understand the second thing I'd like you to do is look up Dr. Brene Brown. I use her often. I use Brene because she is also vulnerable, doesn't mind talking about her recovery from trauma. And don't forget, Gabor is almost 80 years old. And that's a great picture of Brene, but she's getting on too. But there's no time to start this better than now. You could be 80 or 90 years old, okay? But if you want stress reduction and you want to find self-love, you got to do boundaries. You have to be able to say no to somebody and feel, okay, I know we feel guilty. Oh my Lord, that is a measure of our self-esteem. I always say the higher our guilt, the lower our self-esteem. The higher our self-esteem, the lower our guilt. If you're feeling guilt, it's a message, a gift saying, take your oxygen first. I need to go take care of myself, because the more I raise my self-esteem, the lower my guilt. Setting boundaries doesn't make you mean. Setting boundaries protects you. It protects the other person. It gives them the idea who you are, what you'll stand for, right? It allows you to be protected, okay? If you don't like it, you don't have to go there, and somebody will still accept you. You can lay the lines out. So look on YouTube, go to Brene Brown. I'm sure Glenda's putting that in too. But when we fail to set boundaries and hold ourselves and people accountable, we feel used and mistreated, okay? Hear that one. Expectations are seeds of resentment, right? It's up to us to draw lines, to say to somebody compassionately, no, I'm cool. Let's do something another time. I got to do this, okay? So what is self-love? It's self-care. What is self-love again? It's self-emotional self-regulation. That's a lot of neurological words for no good reason to say, gosh knows, you got to be in touch with stress reduction. As a family caregiver, that is your number one concern. No, not taking your loved one to a doctor. No, not doing that unless it's an acute crisis situation. Taking your actual self and taking self-care and dealing with your stress reduction is your number one concern. Listen, it's contagious. Your loved one doesn't want to be with somebody who's stressed out. They too are going through a chronic, terminal, or acute illness. They need you to be safe. Not to say you're safe, but to feel that way. So if you're doing stress reduction, your 2 feet will be on the ground. They'll have somebody to talk to who is safe or who will bear witness to. You can't cure it. I can't cure somebody. But bearing witness to them is self-compassion, okay? It's allowing yourself. So when you're feeling dysregulated or you're feeling any stress, I'm going to show you breath work at the end, but you all know there's regular exercise. You can go out and do an episodic exercise. You can take some time, go around your house or neighborhood. I have a doctor who will tell a patient, I'm feeling dysregulated. You're better off letting me go walk for 60 seconds and come back. That is her relaxation response. Okay. So it's important for you to be in touch with your self-care through your stress reduction, meditate, yoga, and hang around healthy people, just like this group we're on now. Okay. Or Caregiver SOS, if you're in Texas, it's fabulous support groups. Understand self-care is an act of self-love. So if you've listened to me before, you know God love our parents. They probably did what they could do. Some really screwed up. Some screwed up innocently. But we know that our hope is, if you're listening to Gabor, is to be raised authentically and to find a healthy attachment. So we do have to reparent ourselves. And I'm going to ask you today, if you checked in here for Valentine's Day, I'm going to ask you to think about yourself like a coach. No, not like the coach of the Dallas, Cowboys or the coach of the Miami Dolphins. A coach of oneself helps somebody keep promises to themselves. Okay. I throw it in with parenting, that coach, because a good parent doesn't throw the word of love around. It seems to be just the word. The good parent says, I need to be fair, consistent, and available for my children. Well, guess what? Your first child is you. That's the inner child. And for you, if you're fair, consistent, available in the self-love process, you're going to find out a more positive, accepting self. You're going to find out a more loving self if you can parent yourself properly. Now, if you choose, and some do, it's okay. There's a lot of ghosts and goblins that stop us. And I'm asking you to lean into something now, but it's not going to happen with a silver bullet. And also to love yourself enough to know it's a slow going, 3 forward, 2 back. But if you choose not to reparent or you choose not to coach yourself, you do have fear that comes back. You do have meltdowns. These are things we can control. Remember I said, grant me the serenity, accept the things I cannot, deal with, right? You can't deal with a lot, but you can control your response. So let's talk about the brass tacks here. Let's talk about these concepts of self-love. Let's talk about what my neuro approach is. The neuro approach is the only path. It really is. And psychology itself has found that out. So I'm going to ask you to go see a therapist. I'm going to ask you to see a trauma-informed or trauma-certified therapist. Why? You may not have gone through what my cops or military have done. The big T of trauma could be emotional, physical, sexual abuse. The big T could be being in a terrible car accident, or your loved one passed away suddenly, or something happened. That's a big T. I'm also talking about the small T, which is a complex, okay? PTSD, the small T. I call it death by 1,000 cuts, right? What happens with the big T, it kicks in the small T. If we had a difficult childhood, we have that fight, flight, freeze. So if I'm asking you simply to practice self-love, and I'll get to it more deeply in the next few slides, I'm going to say, look, practice forgiveness, right? Don't get on social media that much, guys. You already see that neurologically, when you start comparing yourself to other people who are probably absolutely lying through their teeth to you, creating an image, you go into this dark ghost-like, spiral. Look, self-love is nourishing your body. It's being in touch with it. It's walking around when you're feeling dysregulated. It's slowing down. It's obviously looking more, little by little, up at your self-care. It's following your heart and being unapologetically you. What does that mean? It's authentic. Say what's on your mind in a calm, compassionate, nice way. Draw a boundary. Let the other person worry about it. If they can't handle it, they'll call their therapist. I'm asking you to be your own Valentine by coaching yourself. I want you to become, your self-love coach. Now, again, a coach of ourselves, and I'm a coach to some. I work with men who are kind of off the rails here, difficult relationships with narcissists. But coaching ourselves means we have to keep the promise to ourselves. If we're breaking the promise, it's okay. You can forgive yourself. You're simply a human being. But coaching ourselves is keeping some process and understanding that promise of the end game is fraught with 3 forward, 2 forward, 2 backward. So be your own Valentine, okay? Let's become our self-coach. And here's the best way to develop this self-love today, this coaching heart, okay? How to become a really cool self-love coach. I'm going to lay it down pretty simply and tell you that it's critical that if you're going to improve in life, if you're going to actually get better after your loved one, maybe something happens with them. Maybe some of you have already had a loved one who passed and are building and rebuilding your life. That self-improvement without self-love is just like building a house without a foundation. It's like building a house totally on sand. Okay, you can build and build and build, but it's always going to sink. So why, it's great we use Valentine's Day, but again, this is a 365-day, 7-day-a-week process. It's critical for us to build on self-love if we're going to improve our lives. So I'm going to give you some real quick hints here because people like quick getaways and quick hints. But from a psychological standpoint, you as a family caregiver, here's the gig. Okay, as a trauma therapist, I work with people who literally self-harm. Okay, adolescents, they can cut themselves. Self-harm comes in a lot of ways. It can come in addictions, right? Drugs, alcohol. It can come in shopping. It could come in anger. Okay, being addicted to anger, it does happen that way. Okay, sometimes you can hurt yourself more than anyone can hurt you by keeping your feelings locked up inside. So self-harm is stuffing your feelings. It's not a pathology. Yes, the act of self-harm could well get pathological. It could well become an addiction, but it's not. Self-harm is not a diagnosis. It means we're stuffing our feelings instead of releasing them. So I'm going to ask you today, right? Don't stuff your feelings. That if you're looking at self-love as a family caregiver, don't stuff. Find yourself, and I'll show you how, therapist, or go to a support group, but don't stuff feelings. Any and all self-harm that ever happens from not speaking about your feelings in an open, honest way is what's going to happen. It just comes out in the most sort of dysfunctional way. And many of you remember Mr. Rogers. The beauty of Mr. Rogers is we didn't realize he was prophetic, but I'm using him instead of any clinical resource. When we can talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. Okay, so that means don't isolate family caregiver. You got to be able to talk. You got to find not the bully, not the dominant, not the toxic person who meets you halfway. Talk about your feelings, get them out. With my daughter, I asked her, I said, if you feel safe with me, please, 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 because I try to raise her neurologically safe. But I also have her a therapist. In case she doesn't feel safe with me, I'll let her talk to somebody. Second thing for this month, know this: a healthy relationship will never require you to sacrifice your friends, your dreams, or your dignity. Toxic relationships do. They want all of you. They don't want to give any of you up. They're going to consume you. Did you ever hear the words energy vampire? They will suck your blood. Understand a healthy relationship never requires you to sacrifice your friends. So I want you, in not just now in Valentine's month, but all the time, evaluate all the relationships in your life. Okay, make sure you're only hanging around and spending any and all social time with people who honor your feelings and can bear witness, listen to you, bear witness to any and all stories you might have. Not who run away, not who give you false claims and tell you pull yourself up in the bootstraps or some toxic positive thing like that. No, even with a child, the more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely he or she will be able to recover from trauma and thrive. So if you understand what I'm saying here, we got into this kind of quagmire through relationships, mostly through the parenting child relationship. We got to see ourselves out by healthy relationships. Relationships are the agents of change, and the most powerful therapy is human love. So when you isolate, you cannot really get well. When you connect, and that's why I'm asking you to evaluate your relationships to a healthy person. Maybe it's a friend. You know, if you're lucky, you've got 2 or 3 friends who can do this. You got a great wealth of people there. But I want you to, during Valentine's Day and Valentine's month and every month after, evaluate your relationships. All right, there's a great book out there by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who I sit on the board with at the Polyvagal Institute, and it's called The Body Keeps the Score. Listen, your mind can do anything. It can distract, deflect, deny, project, but you pay for stress. You do. It goes into the body. It turns into inflammation. It goes into renal issues. It does everything that you think it won't do because you're not realizing it, but the body keeps the score, okay? It does not matter if you have good reasons for being stressed. That's the rationalization. It means that you need to find the place, the boundaries, get away from toxic people, and emotionally regulate that stress, okay? It doesn't just go away because it goes away in your mind. It goes into your body. So step 3, pay attention. Pay attention close to your stress reduction. Best way to bring peace on this earth and peace in yourself is stress reduction. We were just talking with Glenda, as a certified trauma therapist, I will say that stress is the first window of the house we call burnout. Burnout, which many of you may experience or not, is the detachment of self and soul. Okay, you really get tired. It means you go on vacation. You can't even replenish yourself. You're just burned out. But that is still the predecessor to one of the worst situations, which is called vicarious traumatization, or as we know, compassion fatigue. So if you are paying attention to your stress, which is a gateway to burnout, you can actually get in front of the burnout. However, if you're not paying attention to stress and you start burning out and you don't get in front of the burnout, you may get into the more darker place we call secondary traumatic stress, vicarious traumatization, or compassion fatigue. And then everything in your life is being triggered at a young age. Any experience with your loved one, any experience with somebody else, you're going back into time, experiencing what it says, vicarious traumatization, things you haven't looked at. So there's a way to stop all that or to prevent, to go to burnout or go to compassion fatigue. And that is pay attention to your stress. It's the most loving thing you can, right? Release the belief that you're responsible for everybody or anybody at all. I'm a psychologist for 30 years. I can't change the behavior of somebody. I can facilitate it, but with all the training I've got, release the belief that you're responsible for everyone and everything. Okay, you got to let go of perfection. Grab the book, Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. He's a doctor. His fourth agreement was, hey, just do your best. Perfectionism is a cancer. It really is. It's just wraps us up into controlling our obsession of perfectionism, which isn't really there. It's an illusion. Remember, the more out of control you are in your mind, the more controlling you get. Perfectionism is a control response. Number three, ask for and accept help from others. So I see my therapist every week. I go to groups. I do whatever I can do, but I still will ask. For instance, my therapist does something I don't do. She's a somatic trauma therapist. So I'm not in that certified in that world. And I go to her and ask for help. You know, I can be 30 years of doing this. I still am a human being, just like you. So when we don't stuff our feelings, when we ask for help, okay, we reduce our stress. And finally, focus on what's important. Really, what is important? I ask you to go and find your why. Once you have that, and I really think it's you, and it's about knowing you, it's existential, your self-awareness, nothing else is going to matter. All right, the next step for self-love, I want you to understand is you are an active participant in your health and well-being and can nurture a happier, more resilient, better functioning self through your brain or not. So we've learned so much in the research of the brain that we know that your well-being can be found there. Remember, I said your neurology, embracing your neurological self. So I know you're asking me because you guys are curious, and I can't blame you. You got to realize that you are the conductor of your orchestra. That in 2023, we can change our brains. It's called neuroplasticity. So as a family caregiver, neuroplasticity, you should know, is the ability for the brain to physically rewire itself. That's doing the emotional regulation. That's the rewiring. Okay, it could be what I'm about to do with breath work. It could be prayer. It could be, going to a safe place you once felt, but it's rewiring. Okay, by changing your mindset through these practices, such as meditation, gratitude, acting selflessly, you name it, you kind of change your brain. You cause your brain to change physically and make more neural connections. I don't care how old you are. It's like a water going over a rock. You'll slowly polish the rock. So give yourself this month that heartfelt gift of awareness. Understand that we know cars well. I bet you many of you can go change your oil. But how about your brain? Why can't you become the mechanic of that? Again, there's only three parts of the brain I'm ever going to ask you to understand, which is the frontal cortex, the limbic system, and your brainstem, which is the kind of reptilian self. And what happens in fight, flight, freeze, our body gets kind of dysregulated. So I'm going to ask you, no matter what, and it's not a bad thing for dysregulation. It kind of helps us run, helps us escape. But I'm going to ask you now to be in touch with that body. So you don't become hyper, traumatized or hyper-traumatized. I want you to be in touch with yourself. As the Dalai Lama says, don't get too happy and don't get too sad. And finally here, too much stress literally shuts down that prefrontal cortex. Too much stress causes the human brain to shut down and freeze. Many family caregivers go through this. Okay, it's called hypoarousal. Right? We freeze. We kind of get down. It's almost like the possum plays dead when somebody's there. Yes, fight, flight, freeze. Fight, flight, freeze is more like the lion chasing us, but freeze is like, boom, we stop. We cut out the reasoning, and we're all emotion. So understand that you can, through your brain, right, through understanding your neurofeedback, just by embracing emotional regulation and social regulation, you can create chemicals in your body. I'm about to do it with you with breath work. Okay, you can actually increase your serotonin, your mood stabilizer. You can increase your dopamine. Okay, these are all things that happen within the body when you touch your nervous system. Your endorphin, instead of using opiates, right? You can just bring in the painkiller of endorphins. And ultimately, I'm going to ask you to notice your body after breath work, because in breath work, we bring out what's called oxytocin. It's a positive love hormone. It connects our neurotransmitter. You literally can do that. Human beings have evolved, not because we're survival of the fittest. It's because we literally can neuroregulate our emotions and socially regulate. So I want you to start looking for self-love at the triggers and cues. Might be people, might be places. It might be Christmas, Thanksgiving holidays. It might be a lot of things. I want you to avoid those cues and triggers, because I think you can get in touch with your body, get in touch with your nervous system. You can create a new chemistry. So that's the tips I'm going to give you. But at the end here, before we do breath work, I'm going to throw in 2 things. I don't want to miss these 2 things. I need you to practice a radical act of self-love here and just go with it. I want you to start giving yourself permission to understand that you got to forgive yourself. You got to find a good therapist to do that. But all I'm asking is that saying you got here for a reason. Somehow you tuned in. Everything you happened before happened for this reason. You got to forgive yourself for the times you think you disappointed yourself or somebody else. It's crazy, but for yourself, you got to forgive yourself for the times you were in the wrong. Hell, it's good to be in the wrong. I get to show my daughter I'm a real person. I can be accountable. Okay, it's time to forgive yourself for feeling like you weren't enough. That's a family thing. We heard that as a child, right? It's time to forgive yourself for things you said out of anger. Man, reactive, we all do it. Even Johnny Depp, right? You saw that trial, he did it. It's time to forgive yourself, right? For any past mistakes. Who knows if there were mistakes? They got us here. When I have a trauma patient in front of me, they say, oh, I wanted to die. I said, but you didn't. You're in front of me now. Why do you suppose? That's resilience. For the times you could have been more empathic. I'm chief compassion officer. There's times when I'm not empathic. For the times you realize you were the toxic. I've been in a toxic relationship and looked like the toxic, but I think I had enough empathy and accountability. You can forgive yourself for the lessons you learned too late. Listen, I don't care how old we are. We can begin today. And AA said the only meeting you're late for is the one that is your first one. And then we have to forgive ourselves for the times you didn't stand up for yourself. That means authenticity, that touching yourself in terms of your body, being honest with the person in front of you. That is what I'd love you to learn. And Gabor Mate will take you there. The second radical act I'm going to ask you to do is practice self-compassion. As self-love goes, as the Valentine's Day month is, we cannot do all those cool tips unless we practice self-compassion, which I'm going to give you breath work. That's a way of practicing self-compassion. Okay. Embracing the shadows, your painful emotions, those ghosts, that, believe it or not, is compassion. Inviting them in for lunch, as Carl Jung would say. All right, you're here. What are you about here to teach me? Okay. Offering yourself a phrase of compassion, just to say to yourself, I'm always going to say at the end, be kind to yourself. Say it to yourself. I want to be kind to myself. Say to yourself, okay, I'm going to give myself compassion I need. Say to yourself, I want to learn to accept myself. Please say to yourself, forgive yourself. Okay. Go about the rest of today, just so you know, and every day, remembering to treat yourself gently. So self-love means you can't read yourself out of this, y'all. You got to go to your heart. It's experiential. The longest journey you make is from your head to your heart. So you can read all you want, but most everything self-regulating is going to be experiential, meaning the yoga, the Pilates, the walking, the crocheting, whatever it is that blows your hair back. I go to rock concerts. Understand, give yourself great permission that this ain't going to happen quickly. It's a polishing of a rock, remember? And the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So we're going to go over breath work. Many of you tune in here before. I do it all the time. I really believe it's a God's gift to human beings that we can do this, but it creates self-awareness. And in the month of February, if we're looking at self-love, it means us becoming proactive instead of reactive. It means standing back and looking at ourselves, reducing our anxiety and stress. As family caregivers, we need to make the move in our emotions from a negative moment, okay, to a positive moment. We do that through emotional regulation, okay? We usually feel disengaged and isolated, right? I'm going to ask you to turn that to a more positive place of engagement. So everything we do is to live in the moment and to bring ourselves into the moment, because the anxiety of tomorrow and the fears from yesterday, they have no place. Okay, we always say if you have 1 foot in tomorrow, 1 foot in yesterday, you're forgetting about the present that God gave you. So I'm going to show you breath work, but I'm also going to do this as quickly as I can so I can leave us a few minutes at the end. Any questions I need to answer. But breath work will shift your chemistry, it'll ground you on 2 feet, right? It returns control to you. It's experiential learning. If this is triggering things for you, okay, if you're going to unlock the power of the vagus nerve, not just through breath work, but for self-healing, I'd love you to go places, excuse me, like psychologytoday.com. Put your zip code in. You're going to find therapists, trauma therapists all around you. I'd love for you to go to the support groups, Caregiver SOS, or in your local community. That's the social regulator. I would love for you to just do these things to improve your sleep, to reduce pain. These are all the chemistry of your body that you can create. Okay. So we're going to do breath work. If you'd like to do 4-7-8 with me, I will show you how to do it. Dr. Weil has brought it out, as many of you know, and done a lot of studies with it. It's very cool. I also will say, go to his YouTube, just put 4-7-8 in after we get done. Have that compassion with you all the time. It's less than 2 minutes, less than 80 seconds. Are you worth it? Is that what you tuned in for, the self-love of knowing you're worth 80 seconds? But if you do it in the moment, it'll calm you in the moment. Your loved one is getting to you, the doctor's getting to you, you can do it in the moment. But if you do it 4 to 6 times a day, really stop, deal with the stress, breathe, you can develop a more proactive practice. So go to 4-7-8, look at Andy do it. I had the pleasure years ago working with him. Here's how you do it. We're going to try it now together. And when I ask you to close your eyes, I'm going to ask you to breathe in through your nostrils for 4 seconds. Go with my voice later. You just go with yours or Andy's. Keep it in your mind for up to 7. If you want, you can picture rainbows or butterflies, or you can just stay silent. But when you exhale, that's how you trigger the vagus nerve response. The vagus nerve, just like it sounds, is the vagabond nerve that goes from the cortex of your brain through your healing organs into your gut. When you exhale, exhale loudly like this. That's what triggers the vagus nerve response. So I'm going to leave you with this. Take a couple of questions. Hopefully, you'll actually feel the chemistry of your body shift. So if you will, indulge me. Let's close your eyes together. Let's put our feet on the ground. If you have shoes on, let's feel the floor through your shoes. And if you're barefooted, let's feel the floor through your feet. If you're sitting down, do it with respect for your body. You can do actually 4-7-8 laying down to at nighttime to get some sleep. But since you're sitting down, let's have your body with respect. Okay. So with your eyes closed, let's just do 4-7-8 4 times. Now breathe in through your nostrils for 4 seconds. Keep it. Swish it around for up to 7 seconds. Blow out with passion for 8. Breathe in the calmness again for 4 seconds. Keep it. Swish it around for up to 7 seconds. Let's go for 8. Breathe in the calmness again for 4. Keep it. Swish it around for up to 7. With gusto again for 8. Last time. Breathe in the calmness for 4 seconds. Keep it. Swish it around for up to 7. Family caregiver, blow out all the anxiety you might be feeling for 8. With your eyes still closed, feet on the ground. Listen, we desperately need this as we're caregiving for others. We need to emotionally regulate ourselves. We need less than 80 seconds. We don't have to sit on a mountain in Tibet. What you've done, if you go inside your body right now and scan it, is you've shifted the chemistry of your body. You've produced oxytocin, as I mentioned, it goes to your neurotransmitters, the happy hormone, the positive hormone. You've literally produced more dopamine, serotonin. We as humans can only do that. No other species can. That breath work can do that in just a moment, okay? It's a miracle. Use it throughout the day. Use it when you go to YouTube with Andy. And remember, it's there for us all the time. When you're ready, open your eyes, come back to our meeting, understand that breath work and anything like this for ourselves is an act of self-compassion. And a moment of self-compassion changes your day, especially in caregiving with your loved one, with your doctor, with yourself, with your group. And a string of moments, just like we just did, can change the course of your life. Some neural pathways, okay? So happy Valentine's Day month, right? Love yourself, love your neurological system, right? And just take your oxygen first. Make every month like this, okay? Know that better things are coming. They really are. So keep calm, and just breathe. Happy Valentine's Day. It's all yours, Glenda.
Thank you so much. Before I say anything else, Jamie, you and I have worked together for many years and you do some wonderful presentations. This is my favorite. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Happy Valentine's month. If you have a question or a comment you'd like to make, if you are on Zoom, you can unmute your microphone and I'll call on you by name. If you have dialed in, press *6 on your phone and your phone will be unmuted and you can comment at that time and I'll call on you by your area code. We have a few minutes here and Dr. Jamie, I'd love to hear from you.
I'd love to respond. Listen, whatever you say, again, this is showing up in your life. I bet you 20 other people are thinking the same thing. And there is no question possible that creates any dysregulation that is wrong. We should always ask questions all our lives. So we're here. Or you can also tell somebody how you emotionally regulate so they can catch fire with your energy. So feel free. The next 5 minutes is all yours.
So those of you on your telephone, we've been having a little chat box discussion. People have wanted Dr. Jamie's slideshow presentation here, and unfortunately, we do not share those. But if you go back and watch the podcast, you can then pause it, or as Ruth said, you can take a screenshot of those notes that you really want to have, that you want to keep in a notebook so that you can refer back to them. So it is available to you. It's just that we don't share the presentation. I don't see any microphones unmuted. We have one more session this month on the Caregiver Teleconnection since February has flown by. That is Tuesday, February the 28th at 11 o'clock Central Time. We're going to have Cynthia Hazel back with us, and she's going to be talking about how important encouraging words are. Good thing to remember in caregiving. We get so overwhelmed, we forget about those encouraging words. I'll be back with you on Thursday, March the 2nd. At 1 o'clock Central Time. And Dr. Tam Cummings, we had to delay her second part of her presentation last month. She got COVID, unfortunately. And that's the beginning of the dementia journey. So if you are caring for someone with dementia, Alzheimer's, one of the many dementias, please join us. Let's see here. Natalie says, thank you for this wonderful information. It's so helpful. Yes. Like I said, this is one of my favorites he's done, and we've worked together for years. Trish, please go ahead.
Oops. Okay. I've been involved in I'm a Canadian, by the way. I live in BC. I've been involved.
Thank you, by the way. I wouldn't even be doing this presentation if it wasn't for Canada. My father's a Holocaust survivor, and they didn't allow him to land in America, and Canada granted him entry. So thank you for everything.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this. It reinforced a lot of the things I've been involved in a webinar that happens once a week, actually, and it's called Reuniting with Self-Love. Mm-hmm. I'm not a caregiver except for myself. And I was just interested in someone else's take on this self-love thing. Most of what you said is very similar to what Dr. Monica has been teaching us. But, it's made a big difference in my life. And I'm hoping that you're spreading things that's going to make difference for other people too.
Thank you. Well, listen, I sit on 2 advisory boards, and I'd love for you, one of them, I'm putting them both in right now because Dr. Monica sounds like she's right on target, but it is a neurological response, and everything for family caregiving triggers, it does, our family of origin issues. And then we take care of our mother, our brother, whomever, and they may or may not have unresolved issues with them, but they trigger more. So cptsdfoundation.org. I'm on their advisory board. I'm helping them develop right now all their family caregivers and supporters, people who are around the person with trauma, complex or not. And they have a phenomenal, very inexpensive programs for us as family caregivers. And you can go to, I have Facebook, Caregiver Connections. Somewhere on Facebook, it organically has grown. I'm with another group that's called the Polyvagal Institute, which is with Gabor Mate, with Bessel van der Kolk, and their trauma specialists. And I have to tell you, go there. They're another nonprofit, but that's the future of psychology and caregiving. To be honest with you, it's not me. I'm blessed to be privileged with these people. But we have now realized that we can change the brain. When I wrote the book, Take Your Oxygen First in 2006, even then the research was not as pronounced as it is today. And what we need to understand is before it was more learned helplessness. Today, if you go to like the Polyvagal Institute or to CPTSD Foundation and think about family caregiving, I think you will find a blueprint. And also for Dr. Monica, neurologically, because we can only tell you to do all these things, but eventually if you can't self-regulate and be around healthy people, most of this is not as possible.
I've learned to use the brain thing too for pain. I've managed to lower my pain as well with the neuroplasticity of your brain. It's amazing.
It is. And, you know, and Lori here, I see Lori popped up, and I think Lori is the perfect question to caregivers. And me too. You know, I work with partners of narcissism, believe this or not, and they're the empaths, people with possible, you know, they do have empathy and accountability, but they're so isolated and they're so lonely. And somehow or another, it is a response to sometimes people around us or a condition. Loneliness is really, it's like smoking 15 cigarettes a day, we say in the medical world, but we have to find, whether it's our church or synagogue or ashram, we got to find a support group. There are people that are feeling exactly like us, and the humanity of support and the groups of you and listening from Texas at Caregiver SOS or in Canada at any hospital group. It is important to first things first on that loneliness is lean in and meet a best friend, somebody you know that's not dominating and controlling. Go to your church or synagogue, connect with them. Be honest. Don't stuff your feelings of loneliness. Everybody is lonely. I have to tell you, when I come in my office, everybody, even if they're connected, it's a universal thing. Do not feel like you're different. You're only articulating what everybody's saying. So lean in and connect to a friend, a group, a support group. Find the healthy people in your life. Okay, once you do that, that's your first lily pad on your way to the spiritual shore, Lori. But connect, don't isolate.
Thank you, Dr. Jamie, and thanks everybody for all of your comments. Loneliness, boy, that's a tough one for sure. Well, I show it's 2 o'clock, but I wanted to tell you that you will be receiving a follow-up email in a few days if you registered for the session today. If not, please call our customer service representative and she'll help you get the information. In that email, I'll include all of these resources. I was writing feverishly. You couldn't see me because I had my camera off, and taking down all these notes so that I can share them with you so that you will have many of those after the session today. We had the discussion about going back and listen to the podcast so you can take notes again. So I want to encourage you to do that. Dr. Jamie, thank you always for being with us. Looking forward to working with you the next time. And for all of you, love yourself. It's important. And I think we can say yes now. We know how to do that, Dr. Jamie. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope to see you real soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Jack. Connect to you. Thank you for sending that. Thank you. Be kind to yourselves.